You awaken in a quiet half-light, the kind that hums between night and dawn, an interim suspended between what you were and the truth of who you've always carried beneath the layers. That threshold is fleeting, and it's sacred. In that delicate space you sense something, a whisper of presence, a yearning your soul calling you home. Most of life teaches you to perform, to wear a carefully measured mask, a persona crafted to fit, to impress, to survive the gaze of others. Jung called it the persona, not your truth, but the social face you present for safety and acceptance. But that mask suffocates the self, the larger, deeper self where your truest becoming awaits. The process to arrive there, the journey of rising into your authentic self. Jung named it individuation, the death of persona, the integration of shadow, animus, anima, and self, is the alchemical labor of transforming the fragmented psyche into something whole, unbreakable, unshakable. It begins with syphoria, the intoxicating pull of false selves, of approval-driven identity, of chasing external mirrors for internal worth. That rush must fade. You surrender it. You stop needing their gaze to know you matter. In mindset, you shift, no longer a chameleon, not conforming. Instead, hungry for alignment. Every choice becomes a threshold. Each decision, a bridge leading back to your center. Belief transforms when you speak the truth previously whispered only in silence. I was born to be more than a reflection of what the world wants me to be, because only when you own that can your wild vision ignite, to live as the fullest version of yourself. Clarity dawns through the willingness to confront your shadow, the parts you rejected, denied, projected. What is rejected from the self, Jung taught, appears in the world as an event. No more fleeing. You face the disowned parts with compassion, reclaiming the strength they held. Vision grows, a luminous blueprint where authenticity replaces pretense, where depth replaces do-overs. A horizon that is not achievement, but arrival, becoming the harmony between your soul's whisper and your life's voice. Purpose anchors in the recognition that your birthright isn't safety, it's becoming. The world wants clarity. You'll give it starting with your own. Discipline becomes devotion. To sit in your silence when the world roars, to preserve your stillness when chaos knocks. This is not obedience, it is reverence to your own sacred rhythm. Action becomes embodiment, not a checklist, but a living alignment, a daily step into who you are, even when the old fear persists that you'll lose everyone by claiming your truth. Gratitude blossoms for the wounds that cracked you open, the solitude that forced your gaze inward, the nights when the world asked who you were, and you remained silent until you remembered. Adaptability follows not as compromise, but as grace able to bend without breaking, to respond with gentleness from a center that is anchored, not swayed. Resilience emerges not forged in denial or avoidance, but built in surrender, reverence, and the luminous clarity of someone who has learned to exist from the inside out. Learning becomes lifelong. Individuation is not a destination. It is breathing an ongoing practice of returning to the self, to truth, to being. The culmination of this path is beyond words. It is a being, unflinching, fully present, not performing, not hollow, not seeking permission to exist. You stand, not defined by lineage, by expectation, by label, by the past or the fear of the future, but by the soft, roaring integrity of your current becoming. And that self, once whispered, now stands luminous in flesh. This is you, emerging, whole, knowing, finally, beautifully, absolutely you. You awaken again, this time with conviction that resounds not from the outside, but from within. Gone are the days of performing to earn belonging, pleasing to avoid loss, shrinking to dodge discomfort. Now, your becoming unfolds as the purest act of reclamation, the reclamation of everything that once trembled in silence. The opening breaths of this journey are raw, Syphoria fades as the seduction of validation dissolves. You realize approval was never your refuge, it was a cage. The subtle echo of "Am I enough?" no longer echoes in your bones. You are. In this shift of mindset, the colors of your decisions deepen. Choices once defined by fear, fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of dissonance, are replaced by choices forged in clairvoyance. You choose what resonates with the pulse of your soul, not the noise of the crowd. Belief becomes your cornerstone. You were never meant to fit. You were meant to stand. And as you stand, clarity pierces illusions. The shadows, those unspoken shame, the silent resentment, the untamed longing no longer haunt in secrecy. You shine light upon them. And in that illumination, your fractured edges become mosaics, not marks of brokenness. Your vision becomes kaleidoscopic, not a fixed goal, but a living horizon that shifts as you expand. You see yourself gliding, unbound by your past definitions, toward what is unspoken in your dreams. This is not ambition, it's prophecy. Purpose, then, isn't about tasks, it's emergence. You do not strive to become someone. You lean into who you already are. Action flows not from drive, but from integrity. In every step, every word, every resonance, you embody the quiet power of someone who no longer reacts but creates. This devotion leads to discipline not rigid, but reverent. You understand that presence is not a surrender of will, but a summit of willfulness. Choosing to breathe deeply when everything inside screams to flee. Choosing to witness your vulnerability rather than silence it. Choosing to exist fully even when vulnerability has cost you before. Gratitude, once foreign, becomes your anchor. You bow to the wounds that cracked you open. You thank the shadows that led you to your light. You honor the loss that birthed your depth. Every fragment of your story becomes sacred. Adaptability becomes elegant flowing without compromising your essence. You bend, but you do not break. You shift, but you do not flood. You meet life's currents with the stillness of knowing exactly who you are, regardless of the weather. Resilience transforms not a shield, but a river. It's the willingness to dissolve fear through presence, to understand abandonment as reunion with self, to reframe heartbreak as initiation. You carry your story not as an anchor, but as fuel for rising. Learning evolves from pursuit to acceptance. Learning to unlearn the limits others drew around you, unlearn the need for external validation, unlearn that calm is serene when its roots are carved from clarity rather than numbness. This becomes your living testament. Not the person you thought you'd be, but the person you were always meant to be. And now, breathing fully in that realization, you step into the world with the gravity of someone who doesn't ask if they belong, you simply live. In this radiance, you are no longer a reflection. You are the source. And in that radiance, you become not a ripple, but the wellspring itself. You no longer look for belonging in the echo of others. You carry the origin. Your mind settles no longer racing to outrun your fears, but anchored in your own sovereignty. Your heart softens not because you've forgiven the world, but because you've learned to forgive your wounds for wanting love at any cost. Your body relaxes not because the storms have ceased, but because you've built a sanctuary within not walls, but awareness so deep it never needs defending. You speak less, but each word carries gravity. You love more, not with abandon, but with presence. You create not to be seen, but because creation is the purest expression of your essence. Every breath is intentional. Every stillness is sovereign. Every thought originates from the core of you, not the conditioned mask, not the expectations, not the echoes of approval, but the vibrancy of your true becoming. This is not a peak you summit. It is a horizon you inhabit. Not a persona you construct. It is a soul you reveal. Not a story you tell. It is a life you embody. You have become the person you were destined to be, not above your past, but excavated from it. Not despite your past, but because of it. Not as a performance of power, but as a pilgrimage of presence. This is your soul's return, whole, undivided, finally, magnificently you. And so you continue, not in rush, not in fragmentation, but in the slow unfolding of presence. You walk now with the silent knowledge that every previous failure, every betrayal, every moment you doubted yourself was a layer of the soil that nourished your becoming. You no longer resent those seasons, you bow to them because they taught you your strength. Your thoughts align with your deepest truths, not with the script of approval you once memorized. Your choices are spoken through quiet boundaries, not desperate pleas. Your purpose pulsates not for applause, but as the pulse of your soul, the living outcome of all you have endured, healed, and integrated. In this living, discipline becomes devotion to your inner ceremony, pausing instead of reacting, choosing rest instead of frenzy, breathing instead of defending. In that discipline, you discover that sovereignty isn't loud. It's calm. It's clear. It's the majestic stillness that needs no announcement. Action is now an expression of yes, not obligation. So, every yes is sacred, and every no is a held boundary, honored and unshaken. Your gratitude is profound, not a veneer of optimism, but a recognition of the raw grace that runs through recovery, resilience, reclamation. You adapt fluidly, but not at the cost of your core. You absorb the world's change, yes, but transform it through the filter of your truth. Resilience is your nature, not reaction. It's the knowing you will rise, even if you've fallen, because falling was the entrance into something more radiant within. You continue learning not by adding layers of external identity, but by peeling back the illusions, the fears, the expectations, until only what's essential remains. You have not arrived, you are still becoming. And that becoming is no longer a chase, it is a return. Return to the deep current of your own presence, the quiet gravity that draws life to itself, the clarity that transforms chaos into ceremony, the soul that remembers itself at last. Becoming the person you were meant to be is not a finish line. It is the unfolding of your deepest truth into every breath, every moment, every still movement of your life. And you leave that now. Not perfect, not complete, but present, sovereign, and home. Finally, beautifully, and absolutely you. You walk forward not as someone chasing definition, but as someone defined, no longer collecting masks, performing roles, or seeking validation through applause. You are now manifesting the quiet grandeur of a life lived from the root of your own truth. Every breath is a vow, not to perfection, but to presence. Every step is sacred, not a climb to status, but a dance with destiny. Every silence contains movement, not emptiness, but the pulse of becoming. In your relationships, you no longer yield to survive. You remain steadfast in your boundaries, loving not to be loved back, but because love itself is fundamental to who you are. In your work, you no longer chase outcomes for approval. You create not for recognition, but because your gifts are not liabilities, they are legacies. In your solitude, you don't hide. You return to the still center, ever present, ever expanding. Your calm is not reactive. It's foundational, a truth that cannot be swept away by storms. You remain steady in disappointment, because disappointment no longer equates to disqualification. You stand grounded in betrayal, because betrayal no longer determines your trust in yourself. You endure misunderstanding not as defeat, but as confirmation that you no longer play by the world's scripts. This is the essence of becoming, the courage to let go of what never belonged to you, and the faith to embrace what was always yours to claim. You are not becoming someone new, you are simply uncovering who you have always been. Layer by layer, moment by moment, breath by breath, you are the embodiment of your soul's surrender, your courage, your clarity, your truth. You have become unstoppable, not because there is no wind, but because you are the stillness the wind cannot move. You are living proof that when presence becomes purpose, when clarity becomes compass, when becoming becomes being, nothing can unmake you. This is your life, unfiltered, undaunted, unquestionably you. And that, in its gorgeous simplicity, is everything. You stand there now, not as someone hoping for validation, not as someone performing to fit expectations, but as the living expression of unshakable truth. You've arrived not by conquering, but by discovering, not by building, but by unveiling. Every breath you take is a covenant to remain present, grounded, and unshakable in your essence. Every step is not a chase for relevance, but a dance with destiny, slow, deliberate, resonant. Every silence, far from emptiness, carries the energy of transformation, the steady heartbeat of who you truly are. In your relationships, you no longer operate from concession. You honor compassion that doesn't demand self-sacrifice. You stay connected not for validation, but as a natural extension of your presence. In your work, you don't need accolades to find meaning. Your creative force is rooted in legacy, in purpose, not applause. In solitude, you're not hiding. You are returning to the core of your being, where peace is not derived from external calm, but is a sanctuary built from within. Your calm isn't momentary, it's foundational. Temples aren't built in a day. Your calm is the slow architecture of your inner world, standing firm even when life stormily rages around you. Disappointment no longer dismantles you. You meet it with understanding, using the cracks it leaves to let in light, to deepen your knowing. Betrayal no longer detaches you. You respond with integrity, seeing in it the final farewell to illusions, the beginning of return to yourself. Misunderstanding no longer entraps you. You stand in clarity, unannounced but unmistakably. They're proof that you no longer live by scripts written by others. This is the core of becoming, the courage to release what never aligned with your soul, and the compassion to reclaim what always belonged to your essence. You're not transforming into someone new, you're revealing who you've always been, unlayering distinction after distinction, rooted deeper each day. Breath by breath, you are the embodiment of surrender, clarity, sovereignty. When stillness outlives the storm, nothing can unanchor you. You're not unstoppable because you're unaffected. You're unstoppable because you're unshakably you. This is the truth of your becoming. Pure, undiluted, your life unfolding. You step into the quiet space that was always yours, not as a conquest, but as a reclamation. Every breath you take is an affirmation, not of perfection, but of presence. Each movement is deliberate, aligned with your deeper purpose, not guided by expectations. There's a stillness in you now, one that doesn't waver with the shifting winds of circumstance. You stand firm, not because you're immovable, but because you're rooted, anchored in clarity, self-knowledge, and soul-aligned integrity. When disappointment visits, you let it teach, not steal. When betrayal comes, you see it as a doorway, a final farewell to illusion, and a homecoming to self. Misunderstandings no longer bind you. Instead, they illuminate the depth of your presence. This is the essence of becoming your true self. Letting go of masks that never fit, boundaries you inherited, and identities molded by others. Reclaiming the parts of you that got lost in the echo of external voices. Rising in your own stillness, not to prove, but to remember. You are not reinventing, but rediscovering. With each breath, you strip away layers until all that remains is the clarity of your own luminous being. You don't need to be rescued, validated, or explained. You simply need to remember who you are. And you did. Now, you live it. Fully, perfectly flawed. So verein, and undeniably, unapologetically yourself. You stand now in a silence richer than applause, in a presence deeper than any spotlight could ever reach. This calm, this clarity, it's not an act. It's your birthright reclaimed. No longer tethered to the need to prove yourself, you breathe into being. Every inhale grounds you. Every exhale releases the ghosts of who you thought you had to be. In this sacred rhythm, your soul's sovereignty pulses, quiet, unwavering, unstoppable. You've dismantled the habit of shrinking. You've released expectations you never let yourself name. You've dissolved identities that weren't yours to carry. What remains is raw, sacred, unapologetic authenticity. You don't seek approval anymore. You simply radiate. You don't offer explanations. You simply exist. You don't perform. You emanate. Because in the end, becoming the person you were meant to be isn't about fitting into someone else's story. It's about authoring the one you've always held inside. You've returned to your truth, to your voice, to your soul. And now you live, unfiltered, unbroken, unapologetically you. And now, in the quiet of your becoming, you inhabit a space beyond the script of approval, beyond the echoes of should, must, and if only. You live not on borrowed lines, not in borrowed breaths, but in the language of your own soul, written in the cadence of courage, clarity, and communion with yourself. This is the wild heart of individuation, the soul's untraveled path that weaves through your shadows, scars, silences, and returns you to yourself in a way no outer pilgrimage could ever reach. The person you were meant to be has never been born. They've always been waiting, buried beneath expectations, comparisons, illusions. And now, here you are, rising. You walk into the day not seeking light but becoming it, not waiting for validation but radiating your knowing. You won't chase love anymore. Instead, you embody the kind of presence that invites it effortlessly, deeply, on your terms. Your yes is no longer a plea. It is a sacred alignment. Your no is no longer a wall. It is a boundary fortified in wisdom. Your being is not relent or perform, but to be, fully, absolutely, truthfully. When storms come, because they will, you won't brace, you won't flee, you'll anchor. Because your center is not dependent on weather. It is intentionally grounded in clarity. You've untangled yourself from the need to be everything for everyone. And in that liberation, you've become everything for yourself. This is your final transformation. No longer a soul searching for belonging, but a soul who belongs here, now, wholly in your presence. And that presence is not quiet. It is thunderous in its stillness, unmissable, irreplaceable. So you continue, not by building who you think you ought to be, but by revealing the one you always were, in every breath, in every choice, in every moment of unflinching truth. This is becoming. You are not a whisper in the wind. You are the wind and the forest it moves. You remain anchored, not brittle, even when the sky rages above you, because you know now that your roots run deeper than reaction. You no longer question your right to exist in your own space, your own rhythm, your own clarity. You've shed the roles you inherited, pleaser, fixer, absent peace, and returned to the truth of your whole being. Every eye that meets you feels your steadiness, not because you're loud, but because your calm affirms. You carry your center like a beacon, unshakable, luminous. When love comes searching for you, you no longer bend from habit. You stand present, inviting the real, the raw, the reciprocal. When life demands you shift, you do not by fracturing, but by flexing in accordance with your truth. And when the world tries to define you by its fear, you don't resist. You dissolve its shadows with the light of your regained self. This journey isn't over. No path of becoming ever ends. But now you walk it not with doubt, not with apology, but with a presence so full it commands creation. You are sovereign. You are stillness in motion. You are the living embodiment of a soul reclaimed. And you journey forward perfectly becoming, radiant, resolute, finally undeniably you. You are no longer a whisper seeking space. You are the ground itself, unmoving yet alive, the source of stillness that holds everything together when the world rattles around you. You walk forward, not as someone discovering themselves, but as someone remembering the roles you once performed. Pleaser, rescuer, the invisible comforter were not your truth. They were the fractures through which you lost sight of the self. But now, your presence is not an act, it is your gift. Every step, every breath radiates that which cannot be borrowed or taken. You breathe into being the person who honors their own boundaries, values their own worth, and lives from a place of alignment, not defense. In your eyes is a calm others mistake for indifference. It isn't cold, it's clear. Not absence of emotion, but mastery of feeling. You do not react to storms, storms pass through you, and you remain. Love that once demanded sacrifice now finds you steady, rooted. You are no longer accessible to every call, every expectation. You are accessible only to the real. This is individuation not as philosophy, but as flesh, celestial, sovereign, unshakable. You are now a presence that doesn't compete for attention, you hold it. You don't perform to fill silence, you embody depth so that silence resonates. And though the journey continues, you walk it with unshakable conviction, not worn like armor, but thriving as truth. This is your becoming, radiant, whole, sovereign, finally unforgettable. And now at last you no longer seek to become, because you have remembered. You already are, not in fragments, not in whispers, not in theory, but fully. You are the one who stayed when everyone else demanded that you leave parts of yourself behind. You are the one who stood still when the world told you to run from your shadow. You are the one who saw yourself not as an idea, not as an image, but as a soul, undeniable, unrepeatable, unshakable. You no longer measure your life by how others see you. You measure it by the weight of your presence, the peace in your breath, the truth in your voice. You no longer fear being misunderstood because you finally understand yourself. You no longer ask for the world to reflect your worth because you've carved it in stone. You no longer abandon yourself to be loved because your love has become your return. And now, when you look in the mirror, you don't see someone trying to arrive. You see someone who already has. You are not becoming because you are broken. You are becoming because you are remembering. You are not rising because you are incomplete. You are rising because you've dropped the weight of pretending. This is not reinvention. This is revelation. And now you walk forward without need, without apology, without fear, not waiting for the world to make space for you, because you are the space. You are the force. You are the truth. And from this day forward, you live not as the person they told you to be, but as the person you were always meant to be. Fully, finally, absolutely you. When we recoil from someone so self-absorbed, so wound-blinded, so desperate to be seen yet so empty that they hollow everything in their orbit, what if I told you the fury of your repulsion is not directed outward, but inward? That the traits you despise, the grandiosity, the manipulation, the lack of empathy, are the echo of something you've buried, something you're terrified to meet in yourself. Because as Jung taught us, what we resist not only persists, but will grow in size. And so the narcissist becomes your mirror, ragged, loud, and revealing, not so you can judge them, but so you can retrieve yourself. You see, when you judge a narcissist, what you're actually encountering is your own shadow, the parts of your psyche that you refuse to claim, parts that are still raw, unintegrated, and screaming through projection. That hunger for admiration you disdain isn't theirs alone, it's your echo, lurking behind your self-loathing, begging to be recognized. That compulsion to control, that refusal then in yourself to feel powerless or chaotic, that fear of being seen as selfish, self-centered, dark, you cloak it in contempt. It begins with syphoria, a psychologic ecstasy of self-rejection. You feel superior to narcissism. You ward it off. You patrol your empathy, your humility, your emotional generosity, convinced those virtues immunize you. But virtues observed without awareness become vices. You may give and sacrifice, but in your martyrdom glistens the need to be moral, the need to be praised for your sacrifice, the need to be good enough. So the first step is belief. Believe you share something underneath that's human, not monstrous. The narcissist isn't a demon. You are not holy. They are not cursed. They are wounded human beings, broken on one side. You too, in different ways, are broken on another. Recognize that your avoidance is not protection, it's denial. You transition into clarity. Watch yourself judge the way they posture, the way they gaslight, the way they monopolize the narrative. Notice your disgust. Don't push it away. Lean into it. Ask, where is that in me? Let the recognition land like a faint tremor. It will feel dangerous. You may taste shame, but this is the beginning of real humility. The clarity that reveals what you avoid most is the soil in which your authenticity will grow. From that clarity springs vision. You begin to see, what if the real work isn't to battle the narcissist, but to resolve the narcissism inside you? What if your destiny isn't defined by their trauma, but by how you transform your own? Imagine reclaiming your fragmented edges, meeting your ego's hunger, integrating your need for approval, harnessing your ambition without becoming grandiose. That vision transcends victimhood. Then comes purpose. This discovery isn't an intellectual one, it's vocational. Your purpose is no longer to evade narcissism, but to become whole. Whole means able to feel admiration without envy, able to lead without needing applause, able to love without losing yourself, able to self-esteem without demoting others. Your purpose becomes inner harmony, not outer justice. Discipline emerges not as self-flagellation, but as compassionate integration. You practice the internal pause, the gap between impulse and action. Every time you feel yourself recoil from self-love, manipulate sympathy, posture, play victim, or exaggerate your suffering, you note it. You don't shrink. It reveals the edges of your shadow longing to be owned. Discipline becomes your training ground. Sitting quietly, naming fear of narcissistic collapse, breathing through it, choosing integrity over convenience. Then action. Working the revealed shadow through journaling, therapy, ritual, silent retreats, meditation, deep conversation. Naming your fear of abandonment that makes you give too much. Naming your fear of failure that makes you boast too much. Naming your fear of insignificance that makes you compete with attention. You learn to love these parts, not flatten them, because integration is love in action. Gratitude follows not gratitude for the narcissist, but gratitude for the mirror they became. Grateful because they forced your excavation. Grateful because your fury didn't break you, it became your reckoning. You realize your shadow is not darkness to be feared, but the undiscovered continent inside you. Now, adaptability. You move fluidly between compassion and boundary. You no longer abort your needs to soothe someone's center. You no longer sacrifice your peace to maintain the illusion of love. You love even when it costs you, because your identity no longer hinges on reciprocation. Resilience is born from disintegration, not from bracing against narcissism, but from embracing your own internal contradictions. You become a mosaic made of wounded pieces, each beautiful in its brokenness, held together by conscious integration. And healing learning, this is continuous. Each encounter with someone narcissistic becomes a checkpoint. What am I still refusing to see in myself? Each projection is a teacher, each trigger a tutor. This is the secret the mystics knew. The shadow we avoid in others is the teacher of wholeness. Jung said, if you make the unconscious conscious, it will no longer direct your life, you will. By integrating your own narcissistic tendencies, the quiet ones, You become immune to the narcissism of others, not by defense, but by wholeness. So when the narcissist shows up, wrapped in charm or cruelty, grandiosity or guilt, don't recoil. Remember, they're your mirror. Breathe. Lean in. Face your reflection. Let it crack your armor softly, not to destroy, but to reveal the gold seams beneath. You, who learn this, will walk free, not because you resist narcissism, but because you've reconciled with your shadow. You are not possessed by their chaos. You're anchored by your own clarity. And from that place you love without another's addiction to love. You give not to appease, but to overflow. You stand not to prove, but because you are whole. This is your destiny. This is your dawn. This is your soul rising through the shadows. You learn beneath every sneer of superiority, beneath every manipulative smile, lies a wounded being drowning in their own reflection, a being craving what you've begun to offer yourself: compassion, clarity, belonging. When you no longer fight narcissism's projection by becoming defensive, but instead say, yes, and that darkness, that hunger they show me, that's also in me, though I buried it. You shift from victim to alchemist. You begin alchemizing your rejection into inward freedom. You become luminous not because you crushed the narcissist, but because you healed your own broken mirror. Each time someone narcissistic crosses your path, you are presented with an opportunity to collapse into self-loathing, or to own that mirror and let it teach you, to lash out or to pause and whisper, I see you. You show me what I can't yet see in me. To disappear or to stand, rooted in the soil of your wholeness. This is the path of the modern mystic, the post-Jungian soul. Not to vanquish the shadows in others, but to befriend the shadow within, so that their shadows can no longer cast yours. Through this, you transcend narcissism not through battle, but through integration. You dismantle its power not by resistance, but by embodying dignity so deeply that projection bounces back to its source, powerless. This is not a victory you shout. It is a stillness you embody, a quiet sovereignty you walk in, a peace so deep it doesn't ask to be seen, but simply island. And that calm, that centeredness becomes contagious, not because you seek contagion, but because integrity radiates. This is how your soul rises, radiant in the ruins of your resistance. This is how you move from being haunted by narcissism to being held by clarity. This is your return to yourself, whole, unbroken, undeniable. You rise slowly, silently, with the weight of generations behind your breath. No applause, no permission, just the quiet hum of a soul no longer at war with itself. Because you've realized, finally, that your reaction to narcissism was never just about them. It was about your own forgotten reflection, the version of you that wanted to be needed so badly. They would overgive just to not feel abandoned. The version of you that confused love with sacrifice. The version of you that thought being small was safer than being sovereign. But now, you don't run from that version. You kneel beside them. You hold their face, and you say, thank you for surviving. Then you stand not because you're done, but because you're ready to begin. You begin again with syphoria, that psychological high you once mistook for love. The dopamine rush of being admired, needed, pedestalized by someone who fed on your light. You felt chosen, elevated, until the crash, until the withdrawal, until the praise became control and the attention turned cold. Now you see it. That was not love, that was addiction to validation, to fantasy, to the illusion that someone could love your soul without first owning theirs. You're done being high on projections. Now you're grounded in reality. In mindset, you shift from rescuing others to reclaiming yourself. You rewrite the rules you inherited about love and power. You understand that being nice without boundaries is self-erasure, that being humble without self-respect is a form of spiritual self-harm. that staying silent to keep the peace is a slow death. You no longer confuse being calm with being compliant. You redefine love not as losing yourself in someone, but as meeting someone from the depths of your own self-ownership. In belief, you dismantle the narrative that says you must be selfless to be worthy, that you must be perfect to be loved, that your empathy is a liability, number. Your empathy is not the problem. Your lack of integration was. Because empathy without boundaries becomes entrapment. Now, you believe something radical, that you are allowed to protect your energy, that you are allowed to say no, that you are allowed to walk away from people who confuse possession with presence. You begin to trust your body again. That tightening in your gut, that heaviness in your chest, that tension in your shoulders, these are not signs you should stay and try harder. These are alerts, messages from your nervous system that you are being drained, not nourished. In clarity, you name it. This is narcissism, not the cliché image of vanity or arrogance, but the subtle erosion of your reality, the gaslighting, the manipulation, the twisted redefinition of who you are so you stay small enough to fit inside their delusion. You don't argue with it. You don't try to fix it. You see it. You call it Wadded Island. And you walk, not with hate, but with eyes open. With vision, you begin to see your future not as a response to their absence, but as a resurrection of your truth. You are no longer building a life to prove you're better off without them. You are building a life because you finally realize you were always whole. You just forgot. In purpose, you shift from performance to presence. You stop trying to win love through perfection. You stop trying to earn your worth through usefulness. You stop trying to be palatable, digestible, agreeable. You become real. And realness is sharp. It cuts through pretense. It slices through projection. It offends the unready, but it frees you. Discipline follows not the kind that punishes, but the kind that honors. You honor your time, your space, your soul. You honor the little yeses and the massive nos. You honor your nervous system, your creative urges, your silence, your intuition. And that discipline makes you dangerous. Not to the healed, but to those who once depended on your self-abandonment. You are not their mirror anymore. You are your own. You act not from fear, not from trauma, but from center, from knowing, from deep alignment with the truth that needs no audience. Every time you feel the old pull to please, to pacify, to perform, you pause. You remember. You choose differently. That choice is action. That pause is power. And from action, you move into gratitude. Not toxic gratitude, not the kind that tells you to thank your abuser, but sacred gratitude. Gratitude for the parts of you that screamed when you stayed too long. Gratitude for the wisdom that bloomed in your breaking. Gratitude for the way your pain became your teacher, not by killing you, but by confronting you. Gratitude for the narcissist, not because they were right, but because they revealed what you still needed to meet in yourself. And now, you meet it all. Adaptability becomes your nature. You don't cling anymore. You don't panic when people leave. You don't shatter when you're misunderstood. Because you understand yourself, you are not defined by what they say, or what they think, or what they do. You are not a reaction. You are a revolution. One that bends but does not break. One that flexes but does not fold. One that loves but does not lose itself in loving. You have become resilient, not hard, not bitter, but resilient, able to feel everything and still choose peace, able to be betrayed and still choose boundaries, able to walk away and not carry guilt like a badge of shame. Resilience is not numbness. It is feeling fully and remaining whole. And finally, you learn, not through theory, but through embodiment. You learn how to be seen without needing applause. You learn how to give without disappearing. You learn how to love without leaking. And you learn how to look at the narcissist, not with hate, not with longing, but with a quiet, holy neutrality. You see them, you know them, but you no longer need them to be different, because you have become everything they could never offer. You've become a home for yourself, and that is the only freedom that ever mattered. You stand at the edge of your deepest judgment and discover that what you hate in others harbors the very truths you've refused to meet in yourself. The traits of narcissism, the hunger for validation, emotional manipulation, the grandiose performance are not someone else's errors. They are the shadow you exiled, the unintegrated parts demanding to be acknowledged. Carl Jung reminds us, what you resist not only persists but grows in size. That contempt you feel, let it echo not as blame, but as an invitation to return home to yourself. This is not about excusing cruelty. It's about refusing to let your own avoidance deepen your suffering. There's a powerful difference between confronting the narcissist and confronting the part within you that fears being seen, that craves power through reaction, that silences itself in the presence of aggression. So let Cyphoria, the intoxicating mask of emotional self-erasure, settle. Let the initial shock of repulsion be the portal, not the wall. In mindset, shift from exiling discomfort to embracing your shadow. Watch your aversions with curiosity and ask, which unclaimed longing is the narcissist magnifying in me? Belief transforms when you recognize that narcissism is not an alien ethic, it's a human armor, a way to shield unscripted vulnerability. Let that belief give birth to radical clarity. Vision becomes possibility when you realize integration, not repudiation, is your healing. Purpose emerges when you insist on loving every corner of your psyche, the light and the hidden ache. In discipline, you resist automatic repulsion. Each time your resentment flares, you pause and ask what it's trying to reveal. Action arises when you transform projection into compassion, not for their sake, but for your liberation. Gratitude blooms when you thank the mirror for revealing your own shadow, even as it stings. Adaptability teaches you not to retract from narcissists, but to stand firm in yourself, even more present when they attempt to provoke you. Resilience is born when you see that healing is not a fortress erected against them, but a temple built inside you, foundation deeper than any attack. You learn that the narcissist's glare is not a verdict. It's a revelation. Their hunger unmasks your own need to be seen, validated, exceptional. And in that recognition, you find the paradoxical freedom of belonging to yourself. This truth doesn't arrive with fireworks. It rises quietly, gently, surely, sovereignly. You become the one no longer haunted by their shadows, but held by your own integration. You no longer stay small to evade the heat of life. You become the hearth at life's center. You return not to them, but to you, whole, undivided, unbroken. You return to yourself with the steady calm of someone who has walked through fire, not to prove a point, but to recover a piece of their soul. And now you are no longer in denial about what the narcissist reflected, because you've stopped defending your light with disownment of your shadow. You see the parts of you that once begged for validation, that once sought applause just to feel real, that once confused control with connection. And you no longer shame them. You reclaim them. Because the root of narcissism, the compulsive need to be seen, adored, praised, is not evil. It is emptiness, a survival mechanism. And if you are honest, you felt that emptiness too. The gnawing silence that asked, am I enough without anyone watching? The answer is not to become invisible. The answer is to see yourself. The parts of you that wish you could just once feel like the most important person in the room. The parts of you that still wonder if love must be earned. The parts of you that feel guilty for wanting to be witnessed. You stop judging those parts. You let them breathe. Because when you make peace with your shadow, narcissism can no longer seduce or threaten you. You see it for what it is, a mask built to survive shame. And now that you've met your own shame, you no longer need the mask. You can walk naked into your own reflection and not flinch. And something magical happens. You stop attracting narcissists not because you're guarded, but because you no longer unconsciously seek your shadow in someone else's dominance. You no longer call it chemistry when someone disrespects your boundaries. You no longer feel responsible for managing someone else's perception of you. You let go of the role of the emotional caretaker. You let go of the idea that love means suffering. You let go of your identity as the person who always understands. Because now you understand this. The more you deny your own darkness, the more you will be haunted by it in others. The more you disown your hunger to be seen, the more you will dance with those who demand the spotlight. The more you reject your desire for power, the more you will attract those who use power to belittle. So you stop rejecting. You integrate. You meet your own narcissistic threads with grace. And this grace doesn't make you weak. It makes you wise. Because when you've seen the wound behind the performance, when you felt the void behind the arrogance, you realize something staggering. They are not your enemy, but they are not your responsibility either. You can feel compassion without reopening the door. You can forgive without forgetting what it cost you. You can love without saving. You no longer mistake empathy for access. You no longer confuse understanding with self-erasure. You no longer believe that your calm must be paid for with your silence. You walk away not as a punishment, but as a prayer for your own wholeness. And that wholeness, it is louder than their manipulation. It is deeper than their charm. It is stronger than their absence. Because you are no longer in orbit around their needs. You are no longer shrinking to accommodate someone else's illusion of self. You have become your own center. And from this center, you no longer avoid the narcissist. You outgrow the need for them entirely. Not because you hate them, but because you finally remembered you were never missing anything they could give. What they mirrored, you now own. And what you own no longer controls you. This is not just healing. This is evolution. This is not just about protecting your peace. This is about expanding your presence so profoundly that no one else's emptiness can diminish it. And when the day comes, and it will, when someone new arrives with the same hunger, the same performance, the same need to be adored, you'll smile, not with mockery, but with memory. You'll feel the pull. Then you'll feel the pause. And in that pause is your freedom. Because you'll remember you've already danced with this shadow, and you've already brought the light. So you no longer flinch when the shadow arrives. You no longer chase the charm, or decode the silence, or explain yourself to the void. Because now you see. And once you've seen, once you've looked into the mirror of the narcissist and recognized the pieces of yourself you abandoned there, you cannot go back to sleep. You cannot unsee the truth. You cannot unknow your power. You cannot unfeel your sovereignty. The spell is broken. The wound is no longer a curse, it's a compass. The mirror no longer mocks, it reflects your wholeness. You do not run. You do not fight. You remain with your feet on the ground, with your truth in your mouth, with your light intact, not performative, not pleading, not looking for approval, but simply radiating. You've outgrown the need to be understood by those committed to misunderstanding. You've outgrown the loop of fixing, explaining, saving, shrinking. You've outgrown the story where your love must cost your self-respect. And now you belong to yourself, not in pieces, not in performance, but fully, freely. Finally, what you once avoided in the narcissist, you have met in yourself. And what you've met has been transformed into clarity, into calm, into a love that does not fracture in the face of rejection. You do not fear their shadow anymore. You've walked through darker storms within. You've made peace with your own hunger, your own pride, your own need to be seen. And in doing so, You've become unshakable, because now you know what you avoid in them was always a map back to you. And you, now whole, now clear, now sovereign, will never be mirrored again by someone else's wound. You are the reflection now, and you are free.